Hello, my name is Leah Walker and I'm working alongside Spiros Manolas, and today we will be providing an overview of our final project based on predator-prey modeling. So just some overview to what we'll be covering, some background information regarding the Lotka-Volterra predator-prey model, 5 models of our own that are variations of this model, a comparison between different ordinary differential equation solvers, and some analysis based on mainly graphs of our population dynamics. So just some background information. Alfred Lotka was an American mathematician who devoted much of his life's work to applying math to biology. He generalized a model of differential equations which captured the relationship between a predator and its prey. On the other hand, Volterra was an Italian mathematician, and he helped expand upon Locke's work by garnering more attention upon it. And although the two mathematicians did not work together, their studies were combined by other scientists in the field, hence the name Lotka-Volterra predator-prey model. Both of these mathematicians concluded that the interaction between a predator and its prey would lead to oscillations in their populations, which we will observe later on. And these differential equations were a breakthrough for ecological sciences. So this is the Lotka-Volterra predator-prey model here. We have this line for prey, this line for predator, and these are just some of our variables and parameters. We have population densities, instantaneous growth rates, time, prey growth rate, prey death rate, predator death rate, and predator growth rate. Very basic model. And the assumptions of this basic model are listed here, such as only 2 species, prey are born and die from predation, predators are born and their birth rate is positively affected by the rate of predation, and so on. We wish to expand upon this basic model and adjust it for some improved realism, which we explored through including carrying capacity, which can be seen here, which is a maximum population size, including multiple interacting species, so rather than just the base one prey, one predator, and also including multi-level predator-prey interactions, such as a food chain. Our ODE solvers. So we tested 2 ordinary differential equation solvers. First, we had the SciPy ODEint solver, which uses the LSODA from the Fortran library, and also a solver that we developed based on the Classical Lunge-Kutta method. So onto our Lunge-Kutta method. So this works by making 4 intermediate estimates of how the system changes within each time step, and this is done successively for K1, which is an estimation of the rate of change at the current point. K2 makes another estimate of the rate of change, but halfway through the time steps using K1's value. K3 follows suit, halfway through with K2's value, and then K4 estimates the rate of change at the end of the time step based on K3's value. So after these 4 slopes are calculated, the next value of y is estimated as the weighted average of these slopes. And this entire process is then repeated for every time step up to the desired time. So here's just a rundown of our code, which defines a function for the Lunge-Kutta solver. These are our parameters. We have a list representing all initial populations, a function representing the system of ODEs, total time frame, number of time points, and this function returns an array containing population values at each time step and an array containing time points corresponding to the time steps from 0 to total time. These are just the initializations of variables that we will be needing, and h here is calculated by finding the difference between the first 2 elements in the t array to give the spacing between consecutive time points. So this is our time step size. We then define a for loop to set the initial prey and predator population values, and then for each time step, the rates of change are calculated as I described previously. And then the populations are updated for the next time step using the weighted average. And then it returns S and T, which are our two arrays defined here. Next, we'll be moving on to the 5 models. So for our first model, we begin with one predator, one prey without carrying capacity. So just the very basic model, which is exactly the same as the model I previously showed you, the Lotka-Volterra differential equations. This model is much more robust to change than the other ones. It begins with initializing our parameters, which I defined previously. These are just some sample values that are very commonly used between 0 and 1. A function named ds dt1 defines our Lotka-Volterra differential equations. The inputs include a tuple of prey and predator population values and a time array defined by the numpy linspace function, which you can see down here. These Lotka-Volterra equations are then returned by the function. And then we move on to comparing our ODE solvers. So we get our first solution using the ODEint function from the SciPy library, which you can see here. It takes in our differential equations, a tuple of population values, and the time array. And then ODEint integrates the system of equations over a time frame. And these lines of code right here then extract the prey and predator populations over time. Then we also have here our Lunge-Kutta ODE solver, which I just defined previously. We call the function right here with our parameters. And then we plotted the populations over time, where we compare both ODEint and the Lunge-Kutta solvers, and the results are pretty similar, or almost exact. Like I said, this model is very robust, and the results are pretty consistent depending on the model that you use. So as you can see here with this oscillating behavior, as the prey population grows too large, the predators may increase in number, and then they control the prey population. And if the prey population declines, the predator population also drops, and this leads to this oscillating cycle that you see here. Without carrying capacities, there are no constraints on the growth rate of prey or predator populations, thus this oscillating behavior will just continue forever. However, first I also included just this prey versus predator phase plane. This phase plane just models prey population versus predator population. But as I was saying, in comparison, when both populations are constrained by carrying capacities, this cycle can stabilize to an equilibrium point, as I'll show you below. So carrying capacity of an environment is the maximum population size of a biological species that can be sustained by that specific environment. So we initialize our carrying capacities right here. They're pretty large. And then we update our differential equations as so. So the terms 1 minus x divided by k1 and 1 minus y divided by k2, these are logistic growth terms that define the decline in growth rate as prey or predator populations get closer to their carrying capacities. And we do the same as before, initialize, call our solvers, and we compare. So this is a very different graph than before. As you can see, these oscillations begin to dampen or flatten out as a result near their stable equilibrium values. And since our carrying capacities are pretty large in comparison to our initial populations, this effect is much more prominent. But as I said, the basic Lotka-Volterra model is very, very robust to changes. So as we see moving forward, as we complicate the system, these graphs can get much more chaotic, I guess you could say, or dramatic. And then I also just ended here with a prey versus predator phase plane. Again, as seen before, this is the prey population and predator population. As you can see, it has this cyclic behavior to it in comparison to the closed shape that we see here. The next model that we will be observing is a 2 prey, 1 predator model. This is just represented by the graphic here and also by the updated Lotka-Volterra equations, where we have this one here for prey 1, prey 2, and then the predator equation is updated to account for both. This is just an overview of our code, since it is in a very similar fashion to Model 1, which I showed in detail. Of course, we begin with initializing our parameters between 0 and 1. These are also just some very common values. And this Model 2A is 1 predator, 2 prey, but without carrying capacity. And Model 2B is with carrying capacity. So we follow this similar fashion throughout our project, just for demonstration. So we define our Lotka-Volterra differential equations down here, where we have it updated to account for 2 prey. And we do the same over here with carrying capacities, with these logistic growth terms for each. And we do the same thing as before, where we compare the ODE solvers, the one from SciPy and the one that we created. And these are the results. So as you can see, the population dynamics are much more dramatic than before. These big spikes and divots are much more pronounced. And this can be explained by both the size of our carrying capacity is pretty large, just to dramatize this effect, and also there being 2 prey and 1 predator in the system. The addition of variables, or parameters too, in your system can lead to great complexities. Like I said before, the basic Lotka-Volterra equation is much more robust to changes. As you can see here, this is much more sensitive to change. And as you can also see, these results are very consistent, as shown before, between the 2 different solvers. And then over here, considering carrying capacities, as I discussed previously, when you consider carrying capacities in a system, oftentimes that oscillating behavior dampens out, and this is much more dramatic within these models here with 2 prey.
Hello, my name is Spiros Manolas, and I worked on this project along with my groupmate, Leah. So the second model that we considered was when we had 1 predator, which can eat 2 preys. And so we modified our Lotka-Volterra equation to account for this by adding in a second x variable to represent the second prey, and we also added an additional growth term to the predator to show its growth from eating the second prey. And so the code for this was very similar. We essentially just took everything we did for the first model, but then added in our extra parameters, and when defining the DSCT function, we put in the extra equation that we just discussed. So the results of our model, so the top row is the ODEint solution, the bottom row is the RK4 solution, the left column is no carrying capacity, and the right column considers carrying capacities. So for this scenario, there was no difference between the ODEint and the RK4 solutions. When we didn't use carrying capacity, we saw that there was an oscillatory behavior that we kind of expect of this kind of situation. And the animal populations never fully died out. They would get close to 0, but they would always come back once the next oscillation period came about. And then when we considered the carrying capacities, it was essentially a dampened oscillator that dampened very quickly, and all the animals got to their asymptotes quite quickly. For model 3A, our next model, we considered the scenario where we had 2 predators which can both eat each of 2 preys. And so we derived this equation pretty similar to the previous one. where we had two x variables for each prey and two y variables for each predator, and we had an extra dying term on each prey for each predator that can eat it, and an extra growth term on each predator for each prey that it could eat. And so our code was, again, the same story. We just modified our dSdt function, our Lotka-Volterra differential equations, and added in extra parameters to implement the changes that we just discussed. And then what was interesting about the solution to this was that in pretty much the vast majority of the parameter configurations that we chose, we would always end up in a scenario in which two of the species kind of died out. And this is true both for the ODEint and RK4 solutions, which are pretty much identical to each other. So in the beginning, we have all of the four species being there. But then kind of quickly, Predator 1 and Prey 2 both died out, which was a pretty interesting scenario. And we saw, like, depending on the different parameters we change, we could change which of the species died out, but usually we did have some species go to extinction, which was quite interesting. Our model 3B was identical to the previous model. However, we changed it so that one predator could eat both preys, but one predator can eat only one prey. And we modified this by taking out the relationship between predator 2 and prey 2 in our equations. And then code, same story. We just slightly modified our previous code to account for the changes in the equations. And then our results, again, the ODEint and RK4 solutions were quite identical, and we had an oscillatory solution again. And again, we saw that two of the species, in this case, predator 2 and prey 2, would go to extinction. And this was likely because predator 1 had more resources to eat from than predator 2, which was, again, quite interesting. And this is a similar case for, like, no matter how we change the parameter values. Our fourth model was when we had a chain. So we had a prey at the bottom, a middle predator, and an apex predator, and the apex predator could eat both the middle predator and the prey. And so again, to get the Lotka-Volterra solutions for this, we essentially added growth and dying terms for every killing or eating relationship. And then for our code, again, we essentially just modified our previous codes to account for this new equation, or system of equations. And then, so the results of our model, so on the left column, we have without carrying capacity. On the right column, we have with carrying capacity. The top row is the ODEint solution. The bottom row is the RK4 solution. So, and again, there was no difference between the ODEint and RK4 solutions for this scenario. So on the left-hand side, without the carrying capacity, we found that the populations were kind of unbounded, and they would have an oscillatory behavior, but every time they'd reach a peak, the peak would get higher and higher. But none of the species ever fully died out. Whereas on the right-hand side, we saw a dampened oscillator behavior, and we see the animals beginning to approach their asymptotes for this situation. So we see their population start to level out. So Model 5 was the most complicated model that we looked at. So it was the same as Model 3B, where you have two prey and then two middle predators. One of the middle predators can eat both prey. One of the middle predators can eat only one prey. However, we added an apex predator, which could eat all of the four other species. And then again, we derived this systems of equations to represent this by adding in additional dying or being killed by or growth terms to represent every special relationship. And this is our code. Pretty similar story. We just modified our equations and added parameters to account for the new scenario. So to go over the results of this. So on the left-hand side, again, is the result without carrying capacity. On the right-hand side is with carrying capacity. The top row is the ODEint solution. The bottom row is the RK4 solution. Interestingly, we found that for without carrying capacity, there was a difference between the RK4 and ODEint solutions. And we found that this model was very chaotic, whereas if we even slightly changed the parameters, the result of the model would be very different. But in this outcome that we were able to get it such that none of the organisms, except for, I think, Prey 2, really died out when we did ODEint. And for RK4, I think we had middle predator 1 and prey 2 both died out. Whereas for when we had population capacity, there was, or carrying capacity, there was none of the animals really died out. So to conclude our project, we were able to effectively utilize the Lotka-Volterra equations and variations of them to perform numerical simulations on the evolutions of various predator-prey systems. We tested two ODE solvers, the SciPy ODEint solver and a solver based off the Lunge-Kutta method. Both solvers typically gave near identical results, with one exception though, which we previously just saw, and additionally the ODEint algorithm was the faster algorithm. And we also tested various different configurations of predator-prey models. Some future work we could do to improve upon our results include furthering our parameter analysis, considering additional relationship combinations, comparing our numerical solutions to some theoretical solutions, and also considering some additional scenarios to make our model more realistic, such as seasons, predator-predator competition, real-life data to use for parameter values, and considering the geographical distribution of species. These are our sources, and thank you.